My name is Stephanie Baker, and I am 34 years old. I work in a biomedical laboratory in Madison, Wisconsin. My days are filled with sterile gloves, centrifuges, and chemical analyzers. Everything measured, everything controlled. But when I leave that lab, I'm just a mother. A single mother. My daughter Maya is 7. She draws strange, magical creatures and insists they all have secret kingdoms under Lake Monona. She talks in whispers when she tells stories, like the world might overhear her imagination and steal it. Maya's father left when she was 3. Since then, it's just been us in our small house near the East Shore. It isn't much, but every wall holds her laughter. Every hallway remembers her footsteps. 10 minutes away lives my family. And somehow that short drive feels like crossing a desert. My mother, Gloria, has always believed she knows better than everyone. Nutrition, parenting, discipline. She corrects the way I cook, the way I fold Maya's clothes, the way I breathe. My father, Thomas, avoids conflict like it's a disease. Let it go for peace, he always says. And then there's my older sister, Renee, the golden child, married to Caleb, a high-profile attorney, living in a pristine house in Maple Bluff with their 2 children, David and Erica, the perfect lawn, the perfect SUV, the perfect smiles. I was always the fragile one in their eyes, the emotional one, the failure, but I could endure that. As long as Maya was safe. Everything changed on a Tuesday in March. My phone vibrated at 10:30 a.m. while I was processing blood samples. Sarah Whitmore, Maya's teacher. Her voice trembled when I answered. Stephanie, Maya collapsed after lunch. The ambulance is taking her to American Family Children's Hospital. I don't remember hanging up. I don't remember driving. I only remember white lights and the ICU doors closing. Dr. Alan Becker placed a steady hand on my shoulder. The situation is dire. We'll do everything we can. Director. I signed forms without reading them. My hands shook so violently the pen scratched the paper. Maya lay there, surrounded by machines, her tiny chest rising mechanically. 4 hours. 4 endless hours of beeping monitors and silent prayers. When Dr. Becker finally said she was past the most critical stage, my knees nearly gave out. I leaned close to her ear. Mom's here. You're not leaving me, okay? Only then did I reach for my phone. I still believed, foolishly, that family meant something. I texted the group chat. Maya is in ICU, critical condition. Minutes later, my phone buzzed. Gloria, don't forget to bring the speakers for Erica's class party tomorrow. I stared at the screen, unable to breathe. I typed back, she almost died. Her reply came cold and immediate. You always overreact. Renee followed. Don't ruin Erica's big day. She's been excited all week. And then my father. Children get sick. They recover. Don't create drama. The ICU machines hummed beside me. My daughter lay unconscious, and my family was planning a party. That was the moment something inside me cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet, irreversible fracture. I realized then, Maya and I were alone in this. But what I didn't know yet was that this wasn't just an illness. It was the beginning of a war, and the first clue had already been swallowed with a carton of milk that didn't belong to the school. The first night after Maya stabilized, I didn't really sleep. I sat in a plastic chair beside her bed, my spine curled like a question mark, my hands wrapped around her fingers as if my grip alone could keep her tethered to this world. The room smelled like disinfectant and warm electronics. The monitors kept their steady rhythm, beep, 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 like a metronome counting down to something I couldn't name. Every time her oxygen line hissed, my heart jumped. And still no one came. Not Gloria, not Renee, not Thomas, not even a text that said I'm sorry. Around midnight, a nurse I'd never met before walked in with a gentle face and a cup of water. Do you have anyone coming to relieve you? She asked quietly. I almost laughed. The sound got stuck in my throat. No, I whispered. It's just me. She didn't pity me. She just nodded like she'd seen this kind of loneliness before, adjusted Maya's IV, and left. In the early morning, Sarah Whitmore returned to the hospital. Her eyes were red like she'd cried in the car and then scrubbed it away in the parking lot. She sat beside me and explained what happened at school. Right after lunch, Maya clutched her stomach. Her face went gray. She tried to speak, then she just folded like someone unplugged her. Sarah's voice broke when she said it. I thought I was watching a child die in front of me. The school suspected food poisoning at first. Lunch had been chicken salad. The cafeteria held the food for testing. Reports were filed. Parents were panicking. But the thing that didn't fit, only Maya collapsed. If it was the lunch, more kids should have gotten sick. That irregularity gnawed at me like a toothache. 2 days later, while Maya was still in critical monitoring, The hospital reported the case to the authorities. A detective came, CPS came. The tone shifted from medical fear to procedural suspicion. They tested the cafeteria food. All normal. No bacteria, no toxins, no contamination. When the detective told me that, I felt relief for half a second, until it turned into something worse. If it wasn't the food, then what the hell was it? That afternoon, they called me into a small office at the school. The principal looked like he hadn't slept either. A police officer clicked a remote. A CCTV video flickered onto the screen. My throat went dry. There was Maya, small, bright jacket, hair slightly messy, the way I always fix before she ran into class. Students lined up for milk. Maya grabbed a carton, then turned and handed it to a boy beside her. The detective pointed. "That's Oliver. Teacher says he loves milk." Oliver opened it and drank immediately. Then my stomach dropped, because Maya reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out another carton. A different brand, not the school's. She hesitated when she opened it, her mouth tightening, like the smell bothered her. Then she drank anyway. Sip by sip. Minutes later, she collapsed. I couldn't move. The principal cleared his throat. "Our contract is only for Fairlife X. Plain and chocolate. That carton is not ours." The detective's voice stayed calm, but his eyes sharpened. "So where did she get it?" I couldn't answer. All I could hear was blood rushing in my ears. And then, like a door unlocking in my mind, I remembered that morning. Gloria had come by my house. She claimed she just wanted to see her granddaughter before I drove to work. I remembered backing the car out, half listening to giggles from the kitchen. I remembered my mother's voice, sweet, coaxing, the way she sounded when she wanted Maya to adore her. I hadn't checked Maya's backpack. I hadn't checked anything, because part of me still wanted to believe my mother was safe. But the video, the strange carton, the timing, a cold suspicion slid into my chest. I didn't have proof. My cameras at home only covered the front door, not the kitchen where Gloria sat that morning. But I knew my mother's habits. She always brought something. Candy, snack packs, healthier alternatives. And I had seen her buy a rare milk brand before, one she bragged about like it was a status symbol. Better than the cheap stuff schools give kids. That night, Aunt Marjorie, my father's sister, came to the hospital with fruit and hot soup. She sat quietly, watching Maya's sleeping face. Then she said, almost reluctantly, "Your mother told the neighbors Maya's just having a mild allergy. She said you're making it dramatic." My grip tightened on the soup container until the lid popped. "She said that?" My voice came out thin. Marjorie nodded, eyes full of something like apology. She said, "It's the kind of rich people disease, like you're trying to be special." I stared at Maya's pale cheeks, the faint bruise where an IV had been, and I felt something inside me go sharp, even while Maya was fighting for her life. My mother was spinning the story into something that made me look ridiculous. By the next afternoon, I couldn't stand it anymore. Calls weren't enough. Messages were useless. I needed to see Gloria's face when I asked. So I drove to my parents' house, the same house where I'd spent my childhood trying to earn affection like it was a prize I never deserved. The moment I stepped inside, the air felt heavy, stale with old furniture polish and unspoken grudges. Gloria sat in her armchair like a queen on a throne, calm, upright, controlled. She didn't stand. She didn't ask about Maya. She just looked at me like I was interrupting her day. I forced my voice to stay steady. "Did you give Maya anything that morning, before school?" Gloria's eyes narrowed. "No, not even a pause. Not even the courtesy of pretending to consider." "Don't blame me for your chaos," she added, lips tightening. Before I could speak again, my father appeared from the kitchen, drying his hands, as if this was an ordinary argument about dishes. "If your mother says no, that's the end of it," Thomas said, tired already. "Stop making everything complicated." I swallowed hard. "Maya almost died," I whispered. Thomas's face didn't change. His voice stayed soft. "Kids get sick, Stephanie." And then Renee walked in like she'd been waiting for her cue. Perfect hair. Perfect coat. Caleb's expensive cologne clinging to her like armor. She leaned against the doorframe, eyes sharp. "Look at you," she said, and her smile was just enough to cut. Back again, looking for someone to blame. The words hit me like I was 10 years old again, standing in the same living room, being told my feelings were too much, my voice too loud, my needs too inconvenient. I took a step forward. Renee's gaze flicked over me, sweat on my forehead, hospital wristband still on, my hands shaking from exhaustion. She looked almost pleased. "You know what people are saying?" she continued. "That you're unstable, that you're spiraling." My vision blurred with rage. "Maya is in the hospital," I said, louder now, "with tubes in her body. And you're worried about what people are saying?" Gloria finally spoke again, colder than the air outside. You always did love drama, Stephanie, ever since you were a girl. Something snapped, not in the loud, messy way they expected. In a quiet way, like a lock clicking into place. I looked at my mother, then my father, then Renee, and I realized I was standing in a room full of people who would rather protect their comfort than protect my child. I took a deep breath, and my voice came out low, dangerously calm. "Listen to me," I said. "I'm not just your daughter. I'm Maya's mother." They didn't flinch, so I leaned in and finished, every word deliberate. "And I won't let anyone touch her again, not even blood." The house went silent except for the ticking clock on the wall. I turned and walked out before my legs gave out. But as I drove back to the hospital, shaking behind the steering wheel, I didn't realize Renee and Caleb were already making their next move. Because 3 days later, while I stood in the hospital hallway holding Maya's updated chart in trembling hands, a notification appeared on my phone. Emergency petition for guardianship. Filed by Renee Mercer and Caleb Mercer. And the reason? Stephanie Baker is mentally unstable, neglecting her responsibilities, and unfit to care for her child. The world tilted. My hands went numb. I stared at the words until they blurred, until my heart started pounding so hard I thought I might be the one to collapse. They weren't just indifferent. They weren't just cruel. They were trying to take her. And suddenly the sour milk didn't feel like an accident anymore. It felt like the opening shot. For a full minute after reading the guardianship notice, I couldn't breathe. The hospital hallway felt too narrow, too bright, too loud. Mentally unstable, unfit mother. Emergency intervention required. They had weaponized my exhaustion. They had taken the image of me, hair unwashed, eyes red, voice shaking beside an ICU bed, and turned it into legal ammunition. I slid down against the wall, gripping my phone so tightly my fingers hurt. Then something inside me hardened. If they wanted a legal battle, I would give them one. That night, I called Mark Halverson, an old college friend who now practiced family law in Madison. He answered on the second ring. "Steph?" I didn't waste time. "They're trying to take Maya." There was silence on the other end, then the sound of a chair scraping. "Tell me everything." By the time I finished, my voice was hoarse. Mark's wasn't. "Okay," he said calmly. "First, get copies of all medical records. Second, secure the CCTV footage from the school. Third, we protect Maya's statement under HIPAA immediately. And Stephanie?" "Yes. Do not lose your temper again. They're counting on that." I closed my eyes. He was right. Renee and Caleb weren't emotional. They were strategic. 3 days later, something happened that changed everything. It was early morning. The hospital room was dim, pale sunlight barely touching the curtains. I was half asleep in the chair when I heard it. "Mommy!" I thought I was dreaming. Then I heard it again, softer. "Mommy!" My head snapped up. Maya's eyes were barely open, but they were looking at me. Looking. Alive. My entire body trembled. I rushed to her side, pressing my forehead against her tiny hand. "I'm here," I whispered. "I'm right here." Doctors rushed in. Dr. Alan Becker checked her pupils, her vitals. His serious face softened. "She's out of the critical stage," he confirmed. "This is very good progress." Good progress. The words felt like oxygen. Later that afternoon, while I was feeding her a few careful spoonfuls of thin soup, Maya whispered something that made my blood run cold. "Grandma's milk was very sour." The spoon froze in my hand. "What did you say, sweetheart?" She swallowed slowly, her voice still fragile. "Grandma said it had lots of nutrients, that if I drank it, I'd grow fast, like Cousin David." The room spun. All the blurred suspicion, the CCTV footage, the strange carton. It wasn't a theory anymore. It was confirmation. I had to grip the side of the bed to steady myself. "Did Grandma give it to you that morning?" I asked carefully. Maya nodded faintly. "She put it in my backpack, said not to tell because the school milk was cheap." Every word was a knife, but I kept my voice steady, for her. "You did nothing wrong," I whispered. "You understand that? Nothing." She blinked, trusting me completely. And in that moment, something irreversible settled inside me. This was no longer about family conflict. This was criminal. Within an hour, Dr. Becker documented Maya's statement in her medical file. The hospital notified the Dane County Sheriff's Department and they assigned it a CPS worker. Detective Harris and social worker Maria Lopez returned that same afternoon. They brought a recorder. Maria knelt beside Maya's bed, her voice gentle. "Sweetheart, can you tell us where the milk came from?" Maya repeated the story, clear, consistent. "Grandma. Backpack. Sour taste." Detective Harris wrote every word. He asked just enough questions to clarify, but not lead. When they stepped outside to speak with me, his expression was different from before. "This is now direct testimony," he said. "Combined with the footage, this is enough to escalate the case to child endangerment." Child endangerment. I felt both vindicated and shattered. He continued, "It will also directly impact the guardianship petition." I nodded slowly. "Good," I said, because if Renee thought she could paint me as unstable, she had underestimated how far I would go. The court date came quickly. Dane County Courthouse. Cold marble floors, fluorescent lights, reporters lingering in the hallway. I wore the only navy blazer I owned. My hands were steady now. Mark walked beside me, holding a thick folder of documentation. On the other side of the courtroom sat Gloria, impeccably dressed. Renee beside her, back straight, jaw firm. Caleb radiated confidence, flipping through his notes like this was just another case to win. When our eyes met, Renee didn't look nervous. She looked certain. The hearing began. Caleb stood first. He spoke eloquently about my emotional instability, about erratic behavior, about hostility toward extended family. He referenced my raised voice in a phone call, my confrontation at my parents' house, my exhaustion in the hospital. They framed me as fragile, unhinged. Renee added that Maya deserved a stable household. Stable. The word tasted bitter. Mark countered with medical records, police reports, toxicology findings. He played the CCTV footage. He presented Maya's documented testimony. But then, something unexpected happened. My father stood up. Thomas had been silent the entire time, sitting behind Gloria. His hands were shaking. "Your Honor," he said, voice uneven, "I have something to submit." Gloria turned towards him slowly. Her eyes flashed. Thomas handed over a flash drive. "My wife didn't know the milk was spoiled," he said quietly, "but she knew she gave it to Maya, and she knew it might be questioned." The courtroom went silent. The judge allowed the footage to be played. The video came from a home security camera installed months earlier after a minor burglary. In it, Gloria and Renee were sitting in the living room. Their voices clear. Gloria, "I didn't mean for it to be bad. I just wanted her to drink something proper." Renee, "It doesn't matter. If this turns into a case, we deny everything. You say she exaggerates. We push for custody." Then, the line that made the room freeze. Gloria, "If we win, the East Madison house and Maya's trust fund will be secured. Renee deserves it." I couldn't feel my hands anymore. Trust fund. House. This wasn't about protection. It was about control. And greed. Renee's face drained of color. Caleb's jaw tightened. Gloria whispered something under her breath, then glared at my father like he had betrayed her. Maybe he had. Or maybe, for the first time, he chose truth over silence. The judge called for order. The room felt like it was collapsing in slow motion. And suddenly, the narrative they built so carefully began to crumble. This wasn't a concerned family intervening. This was conspiracy. And now, the verdict was no longer predictable. The courtroom felt smaller after that video played, like the walls had leaned inward to listen. No one moved for several seconds after the screen went black. Gloria's breathing was loud enough for me to hear from across the aisle. Renee sat rigid, her fingers gripping the edge of the table so tightly her knuckles blanched white. Caleb leaned toward her, whispering urgently, but whatever confidence he had walked in with, it was gone. My father remained standing. For once in his life, he didn't look away. The judge adjusted her glasses and reviewed the evidence again in silence. Papers shuffled. A pen tapped once against the bench. The sound echoed like a countdown. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady and sharp. Based on the medical documentation, recorded testimony of the minor child, toxicology results, and the submitted video evidence, this court finds no grounds to support the emergency guardianship petition filed by Renee Mercer and Caleb Mercer. Renee's head snapped up. The judge continued. The petition is dismissed in full. The air rushed back into my lungs so suddenly I almost swayed. But she wasn't finished. Sole custody and guardianship rights remain with Stephanie Baker. Furthermore, due to credible evidence of potential child endangerment, this court is issuing an immediate restraining order against Gloria Mercer, prohibiting unsupervised contact with the minor child. Gloria's face drained of color, and then came the final blow. This matter will be referred to the county prosecutor's office for review of possible criminal charges, including child endangerment and conspiracy related to attempted asset manipulation. The words struck like hammers. Conspiracy. Asset manipulation. The courtroom erupted in murmurs before the bailiff called for silence. Gloria stood abruptly. "This is absurd," she shouted, her voice cracking for the first time in my memory. "It was a mistake. I didn't know the milk was spoiled." But it wasn't the spoiled milk that condemned her. It was the silence afterward, the lies, the plan to turn my grief into leverage. Renee rose next, her composure finally shattered. "You can't use a private family conversation against us," she snapped toward my father. "You sold out your own wife." Thomas didn't answer her. He just looked tired. Caleb remained quiet, but his eyes were calculating, cold and distant, the kind of stare that measures consequences. The prosecutor stepped forward, speaking calmly but firmly. Given the presented evidence, we are formally requesting that Gloria Mercer be detained pending investigation. Two officers approached. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed through the room. For a split second, our eyes met. My mother's gaze burned with fury. No remorse, no apology, only accusation. As if I had done this, as if I had forced her hand. But I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I felt hollow, because even though justice had just shifted in my favor, the cost was the complete collapse of the family I once belonged to. When Gloria was escorted out, Renee turned on my father with venom. "You destroyed everything." Thomas finally spoke, voice quiet. "No," he said, "we did." Outside the courthouse, reporters clustered like birds, sensing movement. Cameras flashed. Questions were thrown into the air. I didn't answer any of them. I bent down instead and wrapped my arms around Maya. She looked smaller in the oversized chair she'd been sitting in all morning. Pale still, thin from weeks in recovery. But her eyes were clear. "Are we going home, Mommy?" she asked softly. "Yes," I whispered. We were. For the first time in months, I felt the word home mean something safe again. The following week unfolded like a slow exhale. The prosecutor's office formally opened charges against Gloria. Investigators visited my parents' house multiple times. Bank records were requested, documents reviewed. Renee and Caleb's law firm placed them on immediate suspension pending review. Clients withdrew. Reputation, once their armor, began to crack. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that the once perfect Maple Bluff house now echoed with arguments instead of dinner parties. But I didn't take pleasure in it, because collateral damage existed. Their children, David and Erica, had done nothing wrong, and now they were living in the fallout of adult greed. Maya returned to school 2 weeks later. The morning she walked beneath the early spring maple trees, sunlight touching her hair, I felt my chest tighten. Sarah Whitmore waited near the entrance, her smile gentle. "We're ready for you," she told Maya. And for the first time since that Tuesday in March, I didn't feel like the world was collapsing. I felt steady. Aunt Marjorie became a constant presence in our lives. She came by with soup, with quiet conversations, with the kind of loyalty that doesn't require spectacle. "I'm proud of you," she told me one evening as Maya drew at the kitchen table. I didn't know how to respond, because pride had never been a currency in my childhood home. As for my father, 3 days after the trial, he was hospitalized for a mild stroke. The doctor attributed it to prolonged stress. Years of silence, years of swallowing truth. I visited him once. He looked smaller in the hospital bed. "I should have spoken sooner," he murmured. I didn't answer right away, because forgiveness doesn't arrive as quickly as regret. But I nodded. It was something. Gloria remained in detention, awaiting formal charges. Through her lawyer, she claimed it was an accident, that she never intended harm. Maybe that was true. But intent didn't erase consequence. And silence didn't erase danger. One night, weeks later, Maya climbed into my lap while I was sitting on the couch. "Mommy," she whispered, "are we safe now?" The question broke something open inside me. I held her tighter. "Yes," I said, "we are." And this time, I believed it. Today, it has been exactly 1 week since the verdict became official. 7 days since the word custody stopped hanging over my head like a blade. 7 days since the courtroom doors closed behind us and the reporters' voices faded into background noise. Life didn't return to normal. It reshaped itself. Every morning now, I wake before Maya. I stand in the kitchen while the coffee brews, watching the sunlight stretch slowly across the counter. The house is quiet in a way that feels different from before. Not lonely, not tense. Just peaceful. When Maya walks in, still sleepy, hair tangled, she wraps her arms around my waist. "Morning, Mommy." Those 2 words are worth every legal bill, every sleepless night, every shattered illusion. I drive her to school myself now. I walk her all the way to the entrance. Sarah always nods at me, silent reassurance, like a promise. Maya is still thinner than before. Her wrists look fragile when she lifts her backpack, but her eyes are bright again. She talks about drawings, about imaginary kingdoms, about a queen who protects her child from monsters disguised as relatives. She doesn't realize how close that story runs to truth. The investigation against Gloria continues. I've stopped checking updates daily. I've stopped replaying the courtroom footage in my head. Because justice, once secured, doesn't need obsession. It needs distance. Through attorneys, I learned she still insists she didn't mean to harm Maya, that the milk being spoiled was an unfortunate accident. Maybe it was, but giving it secretly. Lying afterward, attempting to strip me of custody while my child lay in intensive care. Those weren't accidents. Those were choices. And choices carry weight. Renee and Caleb's situation deteriorated faster than anyone expected. Their firm publicly announced an internal review. Clients withdrew contracts. The same colleagues who once praised their precision now keep their distance. I heard from Marjorie that the house in Maple Bluff feels empty. David refuses to talk at dinner. Erica cries whenever someone mentions court. I don't wish harm on them. But I won't absorb their consequences either. They built their case on my supposed instability. They forgot that love can be far stronger than composure. One afternoon, I received a message from my father. Can I see Maya? Supervised. When you're ready. It took me hours to respond. Eventually, I typed, we'll discuss it when she's ready. Because protection isn't temporary. It's permanent. He chose truth in the end, and that matters. But redemption doesn't erase history. It only opens a door. Sometimes at night, when the house is dark and Maya is asleep, I sit in the living room and replay everything. The ICU machines. The sour milk. The group chat message about party speakers. That was the moment I truly understood something brutal. Blood does not equal loyalty. Family is not defined by shared DNA. It is defined by who stands beside a hospital bed when the machines are beeping. Who chooses truth when silence would be easier. Who protects a child instead of calculating an inheritance. Maya's trust fund remains untouched. The East Madison house remains ours. But more importantly, Maya remains mine. Legally, physically, emotionally. And no courtroom can measure what that means. Last night, as I tucked her into bed, she held my hand. Mommy, she whispered, Grandma won't bring me milk again, right? The question was innocent, but it carried weight. No, I said gently. No one will ever give you anything without me knowing again. She seemed satisfied with that. Children don't need long explanations. They need certainty. And this time I could give it to her. I used to think the worst betrayal of my life was when Maya's father walked away. I was wrong. The deepest betrayal came from people who claimed they would always stand behind me. But here's the truth I learned. When everything collapses, reputation, relationships, illusions, what remains reveals who you truly are. I am not the unstable daughter they tried to paint. I am not the dramatic sister they mocked. I am not the fragile woman they assumed would break under pressure. I am a mother. And there is no courtroom strategy strong enough to defeat a mother who has already watched her child hover between life and death. Some storms don't end cleanly. Some scars don't disappear. But when Maya falls asleep at night and murmurs, "Good night, Mommy," I understand something with perfect clarity. Everything that shattered had to shatter. Because what survived is real. And if anyone, family or stranger, ever mistakes my silence for weakness again, they will learn what my sister already did. I may look calm, but I will go to war for my child.